The sun had already started its relentless climb over the Coronado training range, bouncing off the scattered metal targets and sandbags, turning the flat, open stretch into a shimmering battlefield of light and heat. Elena Marquez wiped the sweat from her brow and squinted at the ground, pushing herself forward with the broom she carried like a shield. The scorching November morning had no mercy, and neither did the work she did. She wasn't here for glory or recognition, just survival, and a faint, stubborn hope that she could belong somewhere. Cleaning the seal range wasn't glamorous. She swept spent brass from the sand, picked up shredded cardboard targets, and lugged water bottles to the shooters. The SEAL candidates barely spared a glance. Their world was filled with commands, gunfire, and the raw intensity of a regimented routine that could break even the strongest men and women. Elena was neither a recruit nor a trainee. She didn't wear camo or tactical boots, didn't carry a weapon, didn't belong anywhere except in the shadows of the men and women who did. Yet in the quiet moments when the range went silent, she observed. She watched the way a candidate's hand twitched at the scope, the subtle shift in a sniper's stance, the slight hesitation before pulling a trigger. Each movement told a story, and she was learning a language few outsiders could read. "Careful with that broom, Marquez," a voice barked from across the range. A candidate had nearly tripped over her discarded trash bag, and she stepped back, startled. She offered a polite nod and moved along, sweeping another line of brass. It was routine, mundane, safe, until she noticed him, the sniper stationed on lane 12. He was different from the others, not just in the precision of his movements, but in the intensity of his gaze. Elena had seen a lot of sharpshooters, but he exuded a quiet authority that made the others defer instinctively, even if they didn't admit it. And then he missed. Once. Twice. She froze. SEAL snipers didn't miss. Not like that. Not during a routine training session. The hum of the range seemed to pause, the world narrowing around that single, rare flaw. The sniper pulled back from his scope, jaw tight, frustration flickering across his sharp features. And then he did something Elena didn't expect. He looked directly at her. Her heart skipped. Maybe it was coincidence. Maybe he mistook her for someone else. She tightened her grip on the broom, pretending not to notice. But the next moment he motioned. One hand. A subtle wave that commanded attention, yet somehow included no threat. Elena's stomach knotted. She wasn't supposed to approach. Civilians didn't get called onto a live firing line, but something in the intensity of his eyes made it impossible to turn away. Step by step she approached, broom dragging along the sand. The sniper's rifle gleamed under the sun, resting calmly on the bipod, every line precise, every adjustment meticulous. "You," he said. His voice was low but carried over the quiet range. "Come here." Elena stopped a few feet away, unsure if she should kneel, stand at attention, or simply run. But curiosity outweighed caution. She moved closer, voice caught in her throat. I just cleaned, sir," she stammered. "Exactly," he replied. "You see things others don't. You notice details that escape trained eyes." She frowned, uncertain where this was going. He tapped the rifle lightly. "Something off, can you spot it?" Elena's brow furrowed. Off. How could I possibly see what a SEAL sniper missed? But she was trained in observation in her own way, from hours spent watching her father tinker with his hunting rifles, adjusting sights and cleaning barrels until they gleamed, from her teenage years in marksmanship competitions, from a lifetime of noticing patterns others ignored. She leaned slightly, squinting, scanning the rifle, the sandbags, the scope, the wind flag fluttering lazily above the target. Then she saw it, a subtle tilt in the rear support, a slight unevenness in the sandbag beneath the bipod, invisible to most but not to her. "That the rear support is off, just a little," she said quietly. The sniper's eyes narrowed. Then slowly a flicker of something crossed his face, surprise, respect, something unreadable. He adjusted the bipod, looked through the scope again, and fired. Dead center, perfect shot. He lowered the rifle and studied her, not with anger or reprimand, but with an intensity that made Alina's chest tighten. She had done nothing but point out a minor flaw, yet the effect was monumental. The other SEALs around them noticed too. Whispers rose. Confused glances were exchanged. Then the sniper stepped back, not in frustration, not in resignation, but as if he were making a decision. "Stay right there," he said. Her heart jumped. Stay, was this a test, a joke, a trap? The range continued around them, others shooting, others adjusting, others ignoring. Yet in that small circle, all eyes seemed to settle on her, and the sniper's hand rested lightly on the rifle, the weight of it almost magnetic, pulling her attention even as she tried to look away. Alina swallowed. She had no training here. She had no business being part of this world, yet the world was now paying attention to her. She remembered her father's words, whispered over his workbench years ago. "The eye sees what the heart believes. Watch closely and you'll know more than most." Her heart believed, and now the eyes of the living legend in front of her were watching. She lifted her hands instinctively, feeling the grit of the sand, the heat of the rifle, and the weight of expectation. The sniper spoke again, calm but commanding. "Do you want to see the shot you just fixed?" Alina nodded, unsure what she was committing to. He reloaded with precision, aimed at the target again, and fired. Dead center, again. He looked back at her. Something in his expression shifted. He wasn't merely impressed. He was calculating, measuring, considering something beyond skill. The other candidates stopped mid-motion, watching the exchange with growing astonishment. And then he said it, a single sentence that would etch itself into Alina's memory forever. "Pick it up." Her pulse surged. He wasn't referring to the broom. He was gesturing toward the rifle. Alina's hands shook. This wasn't part of her job. This wasn't allowed. This wasn't safe. "Sir, I can't," she began. "You can," he interrupted, voice steady, eyes locked on hers. "You already did more than most trained shooters. Now see for yourself." Her pulse roared in her ears. Sweat slid down her spine. The rifle felt impossibly heavy as she reached for it, fingers brushing cold metal. She lifted it, feeling a connection she hadn't realized she still possessed, a connection to her past, to skill long abandoned, to a part of herself she thought lost. The world shrank behind the scope. The sounds of the range, shouting, brass hitting sand, the hum of engines faded until only the target, the rifle, and the heartbeat in her ears remained. And then she heard it, a voice not from the range, not from Maddox, not even from herself. A quiet, insistent whisper, "This is your shot, make it count." Alina's finger hovered over the trigger, every instinct screaming at her. She knew one thing for certain. This morning, this job, this sweep of the range, it was no longer just about cleaning. Something far larger, far more dangerous had begun. She inhaled sharply. The sniper's gaze never left hers. "Take it," he said. And just like that, the ordinary morning of a cleaner became the opening act of a story that would alter everything she thought she knew about herself, skill, and destiny. And somewhere in the distance, the wind carried the faintest hint of gunpowder, a prelude to what was about to unfold. Alina's hands trembled as she held the rifle, its cold, precise metal unnervingly heavy in her grip. Every fiber of her being screamed at her to set it down and walk away. She was just a cleaner, a civilian, someone who existed at the margins of this world. She wasn't trained. She wasn't supposed to be here. And yet, here she was, standing in front of one of the Navy SEALs, most legendary marksman, Chief Petty Officer James Maddox, who was watching her with a measured intensity that made her stomach coil like a tight spring. "You saw it, didn't you?" Maddox's voice was calm, low, but carried an authority that silenced the murmurs of trainees around them. "You saw the imbalance in the support, the subtle misalignment that made all the difference. Most people would have walked past. Most people wouldn't notice." Alina swallowed hard, trying to steady her shaking hands. I guess I looked at it the way my dad taught me. I've seen things." Maddox's eyes narrowed, not in doubt but in calculation. The SEAL candidates nearby, who moments ago had been firing and shouting, were now frozen, watching the interaction with a mix of disbelief and curiosity. Who was this civilian, this cleaner, who dared to step into their sacred world and do so with confidence? "You know your way around a rifle," Maddox said quietly, his voice almost a whisper, yet it cut through the ambient noise like a knife. "That's clear. But do you know how to use it? Can you read the wind, adjust for distance, compensate for variables that even seasoned shooters miss?" Alina blinked, unsure if this was a test or a lecture. She had competed in junior marksmanship competitions years ago before life had pulled her away from training. Her fingers remembered the subtle balances, the tiniest nuances of trigger pressure, the sway of a scope on a restless target. Yet this was different. This was a live SEAL range. Mistakes could be dangerous. Lives, not hers, but others, could be at stake. I can try," she whispered. Maddox's gaze didn't waver. He adjusted the rifle's bipod again, then stepped aside, leaving the weapon fully in her hands. A hush fell over the range. Even the distant sounds of rounds cracking against targets seemed to fade. Every eye was on her. Every heartbeat echoed in her chest. "Do it," he said. Alina's pulse thundered. The rifle felt impossibly heavy, its barrel cold, unforgiving, like a promise of power she wasn't sure she could control. She lowered herself into position behind it, her cheek resting against the stock. The world through the scope was smaller, sharper, focused down to a single orange target at the far end of the range. She exhaled, trying to center herself, to silence the chaos in her mind. And then Maddox spoke again. "Focus. The shot isn't just about strength or speed, it's about clarity. Breathe, observe, predict, trust your eyes." Her finger hovered over the trigger, trembling slightly. Sweat slicked her palms. The rifle's weight pressed down, not just physically but emotionally. Every second stretched, every detail magnified. She felt the wind brushing across the sand, shifting subtly against the target. She adjusted. She calculated. She remembered her father's lessons: patience, observation, respect for the weapon and the world it moves through. Then came the snap of the trigger under her finger. The recoil jolted her shoulder, but she kept the rifle steady. Her eyes never left the target. She waited. A sound came from downrange. A sharp thunk, metal biting into the sand. Alina's stomach dropped. She barely dared to glance. Maddox was watching her face, unreadable, yet something in his eyes made her sense that the shot had landed, somewhere significant. She hadn't just hit the target. She had done something improbable, something that no cleaner, no novice, no civilian should have done. The SEAL candidates ran downrange to inspect. Whispers turned into gasps. Someone muttered, "That's impossible." Another said, "Did she just?" Maddox didn't say a word. He simply watched her, his jaw tight, as if measuring not just her skill, but her potential, her limits, and the consequences of this single action. Alina's chest heaved. I hit it," she asked. Her voice was barely above a whisper. Maddox nodded slowly. "More than that, you didn't just hit it, you didn't just succeed. You observed, adapted, and executed instinctively. That's what separates the ordinary from the exceptional." Her mind raced. She was a cleaner, a nobody in this world. And yet here she was, holding a rifle like it belonged to her, standing on the same ground as legends, and actually performing at a level that demanded attention. Then Maddox leaned closer, lowering his voice even further. "Do you understand what you just did?" I don't know," Alina admitted. Her hands still shook around the rifle. She had trained as a child, yes, but this felt like stepping into a world she had only ever dreamed about, a world she wasn't sure she deserved. He straightened, scanning the range quickly, eyes darting like a predator assessing its surroundings. "A shot like that," he said, "can change a life, or it can destroy one if misused. That's the weight of this weapon. That's the weight of skill like yours." Alina swallowed, trying to steady her racing heart. I just cleaned the range. I never thought I didn't." You never thought you'd be seen, Maddox interrupted, his gaze piercing. But you were, and now the world is looking whether you realize it or not. Her breath caught. The world. She was just a college dropout working a cleaning job. The thought that anyone beyond the range might notice her, let alone expect anything from her, made her stomach twist. Then Maddox did something she had never expected. Slowly, deliberately, he removed his own rifle from the rest and handed it to her. The action was smooth, practiced, yet the gesture carried weight, not just respect, but challenge. Take it, he said, not as an order, but as a test. Your skill, your observation, your instincts show me. Prove it wasn't luck. Alina's fingers brushed against the weapon. Cold, heavy, unforgiving. Her heart pounded in her ears. Around her, the SEALs watched, the air thick with tension, anticipation, disbelief. Even the instructors paused, realizing something extraordinary was unfolding before them. She lifted the rifle slowly, aligning herself with the scope. Her body remembered movements she hadn't consciously practiced in years: posture, trigger control, breathing. Memories of her father's lessons returned in fragments. Relax your shoulder. Breathe through your diaphragm. Visualize the impact. Maddox leaned over slightly, his voice barely audible. Steady. Breathe. Trust yourself. You already see what others cannot. Alina exhaled, focused, and pulled the trigger. The shot cracked sharply across the range. The recoil jolted her, but her eyes stayed locked on the target. Downrange, a metallic ping echoed the bullet had struck, not merely the target, but a critical point she hadn't even been consciously aiming for. A collective gasp rose from the onlookers. Maddox's eyes widened imperceptibly, his lips parting as if to say something, but he didn't. He simply nodded. You, he said finally, voice low and precise, might be more than just a cleaner. Step back and we'll see how far this goes. Alina's chest heaved. She didn't understand what had just happened. She had just fired a rifle like a SEAL sniper. And yet, she felt more exposed, more vulnerable, more alive than she ever had. The range continued around them, but Alina's world had shifted. She was no longer just the observer. She had been seen. She had been tested. She had passed, and now she realized with a mixture of fear and exhilaration that her life might never be the same again. Maddox's eyes met hers again, and for a moment the world narrowed to just the two of them. Cleaner and sniper, novice and master, student and teacher. Step back, he said again, and this time there was urgency in his tone. You don't know the doors you just opened. Alina obeyed, heart racing, mind spinning, the rifle still heavy in her hands. Somewhere deep inside, a spark had ignited, a spark that would not be extinguished. And as she watched Maddox scan the range, his expression unreadable, she realized. The story of a simple cleaner had just become something far larger, far more dangerous, and far more extraordinary. The first chapter of her real life had begun, and nothing would ever be ordinary again. The rifle trembled in Alina's hands. The metal felt impossibly heavy and impossibly alive, as if it were aware that an untrained cleaner now held it. Maddox's gaze was unwavering, a silent challenge and a question rolled into one. Do you have what it takes? Around them, the range continued its ordinary chaos. SEAL candidates shouted corrections, instructors barked commands, bullets tore through the air with deafening cracks. But Alina felt as though the world had contracted to the small space between her eyes, the rifle, and the distant orange target. Every nerve was on fire. Every instinct screamed that she wasn't supposed to be here. And yet, here she was. Maddox's voice cut through the haze. Your turn, take the shot. Alina's fingers hovered over the trigger. She knew, deep down, that one pull could change everything, not just for her, but for everyone watching. She remembered her father's hands guiding hers over a scope, the way he taught her to breathe, to watch, to see. She had trained years ago in junior marksmanship competitions, but that world felt like another lifetime. Now, a single mistake could hurt more than pride. It could make her a cautionary tale whispered about in the mess hall. I can't, she said, voice trembling, though Maddox's piercing gaze didn't waver. You already did, he replied evenly. Now prove it wasn't a fluke. The world rarely rewards talent left untested. Alina blinked. The world? She was just a cleaner. She barely belonged on this range. And yet somehow she was being asked to stand on the edge of something much larger than herself. With a deep breath, she crouched behind the rifle, pressing her cheek to the stock. She could see the target through the scope, glowing in the morning sun. The hum of bullets around her faded into background noise. The wind, the sand, the heat, all of it disappeared. All that existed was the rifle, the target, and her heartbeat. Maddox leaned close, his voice a low murmur. Focus. One shot. Observe. Predict. Execute. Trust your instincts. She exhaled, steadying herself, recalling every lesson her father had ever imparted: patience, observation, respect, anticipation. The scope became a lens into a different world, one where minute details determined life or death. She adjusted slightly, compensating for a subtle breeze that fluttered the wind flags. She could feel the vibration of the bullets hitting the sand around her, a rhythm she instinctively counted. Her finger squeezed the trigger. The recoil jolted her shoulder, but she didn't flinch. Her eyes never left the scope. Downrange, the bullet struck not the general target but the tiny metal center that even Maddox had noted as a challenge. A perfect, impossible shot. The crowd erupted into whispers and gasps. Several candidates sprinted downrange to inspect, eyes wide. Did she just? One breathed. Impossible, another muttered. Maddox, however, did not move. He didn't smile. He didn't cheer. Instead, he studied her, analyzing her posture, her reaction, the way she handled the weapon with a mix of instinct and unfamiliar skill. You see what I mean, he said quietly, almost to himself. She's not just lucky, she adapts, she observes, she executes. Alina's hands shook. Her chest heaved. She had just performed at a level she hadn't thought possible, yet the realization that everyone was watching, that she had crossed into the world of trained warriors, terrified her. Then Maddox did something no one expected. He stepped back and held out the rifle to her fully, not for her to hold, not for a test, but as a challenge. Take it, he said. His voice was steady, commanding, yet tempered with respect. Make the shot yourself. Prove it wasn't luck. Alina froze. The world shifted. Her palms were sweaty, heart pounding, mind screaming contradictions. I'm a cleaner. I don't belong. I can't do this. And yet every instinct screamed, this is your chance. Don't let it slip. She knelt, resting her cheek against the stock once more. Through the scope, the target glowed like a beacon. Maddox's eyes never left hers, watching her like a mentor, a judge, and something more, a protector in a world she barely understood. Her hands gripped the rifle tighter. She could feel the weight of expectation pressing down on her, heavier than the metal itself. One breath, one trigger pull, one moment. That was all it would take to change the trajectory of everything. And then she hesitated. A voice in her head whispered, this isn't your life. You don't belong here, step back. But Maddox's voice overrode it. Focus on the target, not them, not me, not the weight of what comes next. Focus. Alina exhaled slowly, her pulse settling slightly. She felt the rifle align naturally, almost as if it were an extension of her body. A moment of clarity struck her, the kind of clarity that comes only when fear meets instinct. She squeezed the trigger. The recoil hit, the bullet tore through the air, and a sharp ping echoed downrange. Alina's eyes widened. She had done it again. Dead center. A shot that even the most seasoned sniper might hesitate to take. Maddox's eyes widened briefly, not in disbelief but in recognition. He stepped forward, placing a hand lightly on her shoulder. You understand now, he said softly. What you've done is more than skill. It's instinct. It's vision. It's rare. Alina blinked, overwhelmed by adrenaline and disbelief. She was just a cleaner, just someone who kept the range spotless. And yet here she was, standing shoulder to shoulder with legends, wielding a rifle like she had been born for it. A murmur ran through the SEAL candidates. The instructors exchanged quick glances, whispering among themselves. One muttered, almost under his breath, "I've never seen anything like this in 20 years." Alina's mind raced. Why me? Why now? She wanted to drop the rifle, to return to her broom and the comforting mundanity of cleaning brass. But Maddox's gaze held her in place, steady, unwavering, as if he could see the potential inside her that she had long abandoned. Then he said the words that would make her heart skip a beat. "You're ready for more than this, but it's your choice. Take the next step and there's no turning back." Her chest tightened. "More," she whispered. "I'm just me, I'm not." "You're more than you know," Maddox interrupted, his tone firm but patient. "You have talent, you have instinct, you have the eye and the calm in chaos, and that makes you rare, exceptional, dangerous in the right hands." The wind picked up, rustling the flags and carrying the smell of gunpowder across the range. Alina's vision swam with the possibilities Maddox had just thrown at her. A chance to leave the shadows. A chance to step into a world of precision, skill, and danger. And the unspoken promise, once she crossed this line, there would be no going back. "Step back," he added finally, lowering the rifle. "Think about it, but don't walk away from what you just proved. That was no accident. That shot, that skill, it's yours." Alina's hands dropped to her sides, her legs trembling. She wanted to laugh. She wanted to cry. She wanted to scream. The adrenaline coursing through her veins made her feel like she could conquer anything, yet also like she could collapse from fear at any moment. Maddox studied her one last time before turning toward the range. He glanced over his shoulder and said softly, more to himself than her, "She's ready, whether she knows it or not." Alina's eyes lingered on the rifle, lying on the sand, warm from her shots. The range continued around her, but she felt detached, suspended in a moment of possibility and terror. She had touched something extraordinary, something forbidden. And now she had a choice: step back into the life she knew, or step forward into a world that would demand everything and more. She inhaled deeply, trying to center herself. Her heart still pounded. Her palms were still sweaty, but something inside her had shifted. The fear had not disappeared, but it had become fuel. And then Maddox did the unthinkable. He saluted her, not as a joke, not as a courtesy, a full, formal, measured salute, the highest form of respect among marksmen. The SEAL candidates froze. The instructors stopped mid-stride. The range fell silent. Alina stared, stunned, as Maddox nodded once and walked away, leaving her standing with the weight of the rifle, the heat of the morning sun, and the realization that nothing about her life would ever be ordinary again. And somewhere deep in her chest, a spark ignited, one that would not be extinguished. Alina stepped back from the rifle, her knees trembling, palms slick with sweat. The world felt heavier now, charged with a current of expectation she hadn't asked for but couldn't escape. Maddox stood beside her, silent, his expression unreadable. Around them, the SEAL candidates whispered in awe, casting glances that Alina had never imagined directed at her, a cleaner who had simply been doing her job. The silence of the range, which had been broken only by the occasional gunshot, now seemed to stretch endlessly, thick with tension. Alina's heart pounded in her ears. Did I really just do that? Did I actually hit dead center twice? The thought was almost absurd. She had been cleaning a SEAL range, invisible to everyone, and now she was the center of attention. Maddox's gaze flicked toward the target. "Go see," he said quietly. Alina blinked. "See what?" "The result. Walk down range and look." His tone was calm, but the underlying gravity in his voice made her feel as if the very air had thickened around her. She swallowed hard and moved cautiously. Each step crunching against the sand felt amplified, every whisper and murmur from the SEALs behind her bouncing in her ears. She reached the target. Orange and black paper fluttered slightly in the breeze. At first it seemed ordinary, but then her eyes caught the impossible. The bullet hadn't just hit the center of the target. It had pierced through the metal bolt anchoring the target frame itself, the tiny, almost microscopic point that was designed to withstand direct hits. Every sniper on the range knew this was nearly impossible. Maddox himself had mentioned it before. A bullet had to strike exactly in the center of the bolt at a precise angle, and even then, the odds of it penetrating cleanly without ricochet were astronomically low. Alina's breath caught in her throat. She hadn't aimed for that. She hadn't even consciously registered the bolt. Yet the rifle had done something extraordinary in her hands. She turned slowly, her eyes meeting Maddox's. He wasn't smiling. He wasn't shaking his head in disbelief. He was analyzing, calculating, considering. His voice finally broke the stunned silence of the range. "That shot shouldn't be possible," he said quietly, almost to himself. Then louder to the watching candidates, "You saw that. That was no fluke." The candidates whispered among themselves, a mix of awe and skepticism. A few instructors walked downrange, their footsteps kicking up sand, and inspected the target more closely. One of them muttered under his breath, "Did she? How?" Maddox remained calm, but his eyes never left Alina. "You understand what this means?" he asked her softly. I think so," she whispered. Her mind reeled. She had fired a rifle twice. She had hit not just the target, but something impossible. And now the implication of skill, precision, and the potential it carried was settling over her like a heavy weight. He nodded slowly. "You have talent. Not just the ability to shoot, but the instinct, the observation, the patience, and the focus that very few possess. That shot, that's the kind of thing that defines careers. It changes reputations, opens doors." Her stomach twisted. She had no intention of joining this world. She was a cleaner, a college dropout working to keep herself afloat. And yet, in one extraordinary moment, she had thrust herself into the center of something larger than herself. One of the instructors turned toward Maddox, voice low but sharp. "Chief, she's a civilian. This isn't part of the program. She can't." Maddox held up a hand, stopping him mid-sentence. "I know, but she just did something none of your trainees could, and she did it instinctively. She's extraordinary. Let's leave it at that for now." Alina felt her chest tighten. Extraordinary. The word sounded alien, foreign. She had spent her life trying to be invisible, trying to survive quietly, and now she was extraordinary. She wasn't sure if she should feel pride, fear, or both. Maddox turned back to her, his expression shifting into something softer, almost protective. "You need to understand something, Alina," he said. "That shot, it wasn't just about skill. It was about timing, perception, decision-making. Everything you've learned, every instinct you've buried, came together in a way that defies odds. Most people can't replicate it." Alina's lips parted, but no words came. She could feel the eyes of everyone on the range burning into her. The adrenaline coursing through her veins made her feel both powerful and fragile. Then Maddox's expression darkened slightly. "That shot," he continued, voice lower now, "also puts a target on you. Not just here on the range, but out there. People pay attention to rare talent. You need to be aware of that." Her stomach dropped. A target. She wasn't ready for that. She was barely ready to understand what she had just done. Before she could speak, Maddox's radio crackled, urgent and insistent. He stiffened, his jaw tight. The change was immediate, a shift from measured mentor to alert operator. "Alina," he said, voice urgent, "step back now." Her heart lurched. Step back from what? She obeyed instinctively, moving behind him as he scanned the range, radio in hand. The sense of danger was sudden, visceral, and real. She watched Maddox communicate rapidly, tension in his posture, eyes sharp, scanning every angle. The calm, measured man she had just known seemed to vanish, replaced by someone hyper-aware, someone ready to act instantly. What's happening?" she asked, voice trembling. Maddox didn't answer immediately. He continued his communication, nodding and responding in clipped phrases. When he finally looked at her, his eyes were dark, serious. "Something going on," he said. "A situation that requires precision and discretion. That shot you made, it's caught someone's attention, and they're not all friendly." Alina's mind spun. Her pulse raced, adrenaline flooding her system. She hadn't considered consequences beyond the range, beyond Maddox's recognition. And now, suddenly, the stakes had escalated. A few of the instructors and trainees started whispering among themselves, uncertainty and curiosity rippling through the crowd. Maddox motioned for everyone to keep their distance. "Range secure," he said tersely, voice cutting through the murmurs. "No one moves until I say so." Alina's hands shook. She had just performed something extraordinary. Now, that very act had triggered something she didn't understand, something potentially dangerous. Maddox glanced at her, expression unreadable. "You have no idea what just happened," he said, "but you're about to find out, and you're going to need to trust me." Her stomach churned. She wanted to ask questions. Why me? What is happening? But the urgency in his voice, the controlled intensity in his posture, left no room for hesitation. She nodded, even though she had no idea what she was agreeing to. Maddox handed the rifle back to her, carefully, reverently, almost as if it were a sacred artifact. "Keep it, but be ready. This isn't over, not by a long shot." Alina held the weapon, feeling its weight, its promise, and its danger. A sense of foreboding settled over her. She had crossed into a world she barely understood. The line between ordinary life and something extraordinary had been crossed, and there was no turning back. She looked downrange once more at the target, now slightly dented from the impossible shot she had made. A shiver ran through her, excitement, fear, and anticipation tangled into a single, sharp edge. The seals around her began to whisper again, some in awe, some in disbelief. Maddox didn't acknowledge them. His focus remained entirely on her, and in his eyes, Alina saw a rare mix of respect, concern, and calculation. "Step back," he said again, more firmly. "We have to move now." As she complied, following him toward the safety of the range's shaded equipment shed, Alina realized that the ordinary world she had known, the world of cleaning brass, keeping herself invisible, living a life of quiet survival, had vanished. The impossible shot she had fired had not only demonstrated skill, but also thrust her into a reality she wasn't prepared for, where every action carried consequences beyond her comprehension. And as Maddox glanced back over his shoulder, eyes sharp, voice steady yet urgent, she understood one undeniable truth. The life she had thought she led was gone. Her world had changed forever. And the next chapter was about to begin. The shed was small and dimly lit, a refuge from the blinding California sun and the deafening cacophony of the firing range. Alina sank onto the edge of a dusty workbench, her hands still gripping the rifle as if letting go would shatter the impossible morning she had just lived. Maddox leaned against the opposite wall, his arms crossed, eyes scanning the range beyond the open door as if the world itself might collapse under the weight of a single mistake. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The only sounds were the distant cracks of gunfire, the low hum of engines, and Alina's own heartbeat hammering in her ears. She felt a mixture of exhilaration and terror she couldn't quite untangle. Her hands trembled, not from the rifle's weight, but from the awareness that she had crossed a line she could never uncross. Maddox finally broke the silence. "That shot you made, it wasn't luck, it wasn't coincidence. That level of instinct, patience, and precision doesn't appear in a vacuum." Alina's chest tightened. I've done this before. I mean, not like this, but I've held rifles, I've practiced, I've competed." Her voice wavered. "But this is different. I don't know why it happened today." Maddox's eyes softened, yet remained intense. "You don't remember because you've been hiding, but I see it. The skill, the instinct. It's all there, buried under years of running, of hiding, of trying to be invisible. You didn't just show me talent today, you showed me your past, and it's catching up with you." Alina froze. Her past. The memories she had spent years locking away, memories she thought were buried deep, invisible beneath the mundane layers of cleaning and survival, threatened to surface. She hadn't told anyone. Not her roommates, not her friends, not even herself. I don't understand, she whispered. My past isn't relevant here, I'm just me. I clean the range, that's all I am. Maddox's jaw tightened. That's exactly the problem. You've been pretending that cleaning brass and sweeping targets is all you are. But that's not true. You've had experience. You've had training. And that training, that history, it makes you valuable, dangerous, to the right people and to the wrong ones. Alina's stomach churned. Dangerous. Valuable. Her life had been defined by caution, by invisibility, by moving silently through the world so no one would notice the holes in her past, the mistakes she had survived but never spoken of. And now, in a single morning, her skill had thrust her into a spotlight she wasn't ready to face. You don't have to tell me everything now, Maddox continued, his tone firm but not unkind. I just need to know enough to keep you alive, because that shot, it did more than prove skill. It sent a signal. Someone out there noticed. Someone who will care about that shot more than they care about your cleaning duties. Alina's heart lurched. Someone noticed who? Maddox shook his head. I can't tell you that yet, but you need to understand your past isn't gone. It's waiting, and it's coming back whether you're ready or not. She swallowed hard, trying to make sense of the words. Her past had always been her shield. The mistakes she had survived, the dangerous moments she had evaded, the skills she had honed in secrecy, all of it had been carefully hidden. And now Maddox was telling her it wasn't hidden anymore. I thought I left that life behind, she said quietly, almost to herself. I thought I could just disappear. Maddox stepped closer, his eyes locking onto hers. Disappearing only works until someone notices what you're capable of. And today, you proved that you're capable of something extraordinary. That shot wasn't just a shot. It was a signal, and signals have consequences. Alina's chest tightened, and memories she had tried to suppress surfaced with a sudden intensity. Nights spent training alone in abandoned warehouses. Hours spent perfecting precision under the watchful eyes of instructors she could never tell anyone about. The adrenaline, the fear, the thrill, all of it buried under years of ordinary survival. She had run from that life for a reason. She had escaped danger, secrecy, and the weight of expectation. She had tried to bury her skills beneath a facade of normalcy. And now she realized it had been impossible. Maddox's voice broke through her spiraling thoughts. You're not just cleaning this range. You're standing at the edge of a world you can't ignore. Your past is alive. Your skill is alive. And someone is watching. Alina's hands shook as she gripped the rifle again. Why me? Why now? I didn't ask for this. Maddox's expression softened, though his eyes remained intense. Because the moment you revealed your skill, you became relevant. The world doesn't care about civilians who hide. It only notices those who can do the impossible. And you did. Her stomach twisted with fear and disbelief. She had always believed that invisibility was safety. That if she stayed small, stayed quiet, stayed in the shadows, no one could touch her. And yet today, she had stepped into the light, willingly or not, and the world had noticed. Maddox took a deep breath and placed a hand lightly on her shoulder. I'm not going to lie to you, Alina. This isn't a game. The people who notice skills like yours aren't always friendly. And the life you thought you left behind, it's not gone. It's coming back, but you have a choice. Alina looked up at him, eyes wide, heart pounding. A choice? What choice? Maddox's voice was steady, deliberate. You can walk away, pretend none of this happened, and try to return to the ordinary life you've built. Or you can step forward. Embrace the skill, the instinct, the history you've tried to bury. Take control of it. Use it. And in doing so, you might just survive what's coming next. Her mind raced. The idea of stepping back into her old life was tempting, safe, familiar, predictable. But she knew, deep down, that it was a lie. the skill that had burst from her fingertips that morning was not something she could hide again. "And if I say yes," she whispered. "Then," Maddox said, eyes locking onto hers, "I'll train you, guide you, keep you alive. But I won't sugarcoat it, it will be dangerous. You'll be tested in ways you can't imagine, and you may not like what you discover about yourself." Alina's chest tightened. She felt fear, exhilaration, and a strange, unbidden thrill coursing through her veins. For the first time in years, she realized that hiding had been a prison. The past she had tried to bury was alive, and it was calling her forward, demanding that she confront it. Her hands gripped the rifle tighter. She looked at Maddox, saw the intensity in his gaze, the unspoken promise and threat entwined together. She realized that the choice was no longer theoretical. The world she had tried to stay hidden from had found her, and the only way to survive, the only way to reclaim control, was to step forward. She began, voice trembling, "I'll do it. I'll step forward." Maddox's expression softened ever so slightly, a hint of a smile tugging at the corners of his lips. "Good, that's the first step. But understand this, it's not just the skill that will be tested. It's you. Every instinct, every choice, every secret you thought you buried. You're about to discover that the past you ran from never really left you." Alina swallowed, the weight of his words settling over her like a storm cloud. The shed felt smaller, the air thicker, the shadows longer. But beneath the fear, a spark ignited, a spark that had been dormant for years, buried beneath the mundanity of cleaning, hiding, and survival. She stood, rifle in hand, shoulders straight, and met Maddox's gaze. "I'm ready," she said, voice trembling but firm. Maddox nodded. "Good, because the moment you fire that shot, the world notices, and once it notices, there's no going back." Alina felt a chill run down her spine. The impossible shot she had made that morning was only the beginning. The past she had tried to bury had found her, and the choices she was about to make would determine not just her survival, but everything she had ever believed about herself. The next chapter had begun, and it would demand everything she had. The sun was low over the SEAL training compound, casting long, jagged shadows across the sand and steel targets. Alina followed Maddox down the winding paths between bunkers and firing ranges, rifle slung over her shoulder, heart hammering in her chest. Every step felt heavy, as though the weight of her choice to step forward had finally settled in her bones. She had agreed to this. She had chosen to confront her buried past, embrace her instincts, and step into a world of precision, danger, and uncertainty. Yet now, as Maddox guided her toward a secluded section of the range, fear gnawed at the edges of her resolve. "This is the first real test," Maddox said, his voice low, steady, carrying the authority of someone who had seen countless recruits crumble under pressure. "Not everyone passes, not everyone survives, but it's designed to push you, to show you who you really are when the world is watching and when mistakes can't be undone." Alina swallowed hard, gripping her rifle tighter. What kind of test?" she asked, trying to keep her voice steady. Maddox's eyes glinted. "Think of it as a simulation, but with consequences you can feel. You'll navigate a live range, identify targets, and make split-second decisions under pressure. But the twist? Some of the obstacles are unpredictable. Some may test more than your skill, they'll test your instincts, your judgment, and your ability to stay calm when chaos erupts." Her pulse quickened. She had handled pressure before. She had fired rifles in competitions. She had cleaned ranges while bullets flew nearby, but this sounded different, real, dangerous. They reached a small, secluded part of the range. Maddox motioned for her to stop. "This area is controlled, but it simulates unpredictability. Targets will appear, some moving, some stationary. You'll need to engage with precision. Every second counts. Hesitate and you fail. Succeed and you learn more about yourself than you ever could in a controlled environment." Alina's stomach twisted. Her past had trained her for skill, but Maddox was introducing a new element: mental toughness, instinct, adaptability. "Step into position," he instructed. He handed her a modified rifle, lighter than the one she had used before but still deadly in its precision. "This is your first live engagement. No pressure, no room for error. Trust your instincts. Remember what you've done. Trust yourself." She nodded, heart racing. Her fingers traced the familiar contours of the rifle. Her breathing steadied. Her mind focused. She had done this before twice today, and now she would do it again. Only this time the stakes were higher. Maddox stepped back. "Begin." From the shadows of the range, targets emerged. Some were stationary, set at distances that would challenge even the most experienced marksman. Others moved unpredictably, appearing and disappearing between steel barriers. The first shot rang out. Alina's heart jumped, adrenaline surging as she raised the rifle to her shoulder. Her first instinct was hesitation. The moving target shifted slightly, a blur of motion against the sandy backdrop. She adjusted her aim, recalling the countless hours she had spent training in secret, the precision drills, the practice that had honed her eyes and hands long before she had considered this moment. The trigger clicked. Recoil jolted her shoulder, but her focus remained unwavering. The target went down with a sharp metallic ping. Her breath caught in relief, and then Maddox's voice cut through the haze. "Good, next." The next sequence came faster. Multiple targets emerged simultaneously, some moving erratically, others hidden partially behind obstacles. She had seconds to identify each one, calculate the distance, the angle, the wind, and decide whether to engage. Hesitation was lethal. Alina's hands moved almost automatically, her instincts guiding her. A shot here, a shot there, each precise, deliberate, calculated. Maddox observed silently, analyzing her every move, nodding the calm in her eyes despite the chaos around her. But then something unexpected happened. A target moved differently than she anticipated, faster, with an erratic rhythm that threw off her calculations. She hesitated for a fraction of a second, enough for doubt to creep in. Maddox's voice snapped sharply. "Trust yourself, Alina. Stop calculating every variable. Move with instinct. You've done this before. Let your training guide you." Her chest heaved. He was right. She had trained, she had instinct, she had the skill. Hesitation was her enemy. She focused, shut out the fear, and acted. The shot rang out, bullseye. Maddox's eyes narrowed slightly, impressed, but he didn't praise her. There was no time for praise. The final sequence had begun. From the perimeter, simulated threats appeared, sudden, unpredictable, and designed to rattle her concentration. Flashing lights, moving dummies, and decoys forced her to decide in an instant what was real and what was distraction. Each shot had to count. One misstep, one wasted round, and the simulation would fail, and she would fail with it. Her pulse raced, sweat beaded on her forehead. The world narrowed again to the rifle, the scope, the targets. Instinct took over. She moved with fluid precision, firing only when necessary, her eyes scanning, analyzing, predicting. Each successful shot reinforced her confidence. Each near miss taught her to adjust, to anticipate, to remain calm. Finally, the chaos subsided. Targets fell, obstacles cleared, and the simulated threat ended. Alina lowered the rifle, chest heaving, hands shaking not from fatigue but from adrenaline and exhilaration. Maddox approached, his expression unreadable. For a long moment he simply studied her, as if measuring not just her skill but her resolve, her instincts, her ability to adapt under pressure. "You passed," he said finally, voice low but carrying weight. "Not everyone does. Not everyone can handle the unpredictability, the chaos, and the pressure of real engagement. You did. You didn't just survive, you thrived." Alina's knees weakened and she sank slightly against the sand. I did," she asked, voice barely above a whisper. She felt elation, fear, and disbelief all at once. Maddox nodded. "You did, but understand this, the test isn't over. Today this was controlled, contained. Tomorrow the stakes will be real. People will notice. Your skills will draw attention, and not everyone who notices is friendly. Her stomach twisted. She had hoped the test would end here, that the rush of adrenaline and triumph would be enough. But Maddox's words reminded her that the world she had stepped into was unforgiving. One impossible shot today had set a chain reaction in motion, and survival required constant vigilance, skill, and instinct. He placed a hand lightly on her shoulder. You have talent, Alina, extraordinary talent, but talent alone isn't enough. You need discipline, control, and the ability to make impossible decisions under pressure. Today, you've shown potential, but the real test is coming. Alina's mind raced. She had faced chaos today, simulated danger and impossible shots. She had survived and even excelled. And yet, Maddox's words left a lingering tension, a shadow of what was yet to come. She looked down at the rifle, still warm from her grip, and realized that this weapon was more than metal and wood. It was a tool, a responsibility, and a key to survival in a world that demanded precision, instinct, and courage. Maddox's eyes met hers, steady and unwavering. You're ready to step further, he said. But be warned, the next phase won't be contained, it won't be predictable, and it will force you to confront everything you've buried. Are you ready for that? Alina swallowed hard, her hands tightening around the rifle. Fear pulsed through her veins, but beneath it, a spark of determination ignited. She had chosen this path. She had stepped into a world she didn't fully understand. And now, with every heartbeat, she realized there was no turning back. I'm ready, she said, voice steady despite the adrenaline still coursing through her body. Maddox nodded once, a rare, fleeting smile tugging at the corner of his lips. Good, because the world is watching, and it's about to get very real. The sun dipped lower, casting the range in long, dramatic shadows. Alina stood, rifle in hand, adrenaline and anticipation mingling in a cocktail of fear and exhilaration. The first test had been survived. The next challenge awaited, one that would push her instincts, skill, and courage to their absolute limits. And for the first time, Alina felt truly alive. Night had fallen over the Seal compound, cloaking the range and surrounding terrain in darkness. The quiet hum of generators and distant footsteps created an eerie symphony, amplified by the chill in the desert air. Alina moved cautiously alongside Maddox, rifle slung across her chest, every muscle coiled like a spring. The adrenaline from the day's training still pulsed through her veins, but it was replaced now by something sharper, a gnawing awareness that the real danger was no longer a simulation. They're here, Maddox said softly, his eyes scanning the perimeter through night vision goggles. You're not imagining it. Alina froze, her pulse spiking. Who? What are you talking about? Maddox's jaw tightened. People who noticed your skill today, they didn't just see a cleaner fire two impossible shots. They saw potential, threat, and right now they're moving. You need to get to the extraction point, quietly, no mistakes. Her stomach turned. Extraction point. She had imagined danger in abstract terms before, but now, under the desert night, she could feel the weight of reality pressing in. Every shadow could conceal an enemy. Every sound could be a threat. Maddox gestured for her to follow. Move, no running, stay in cover. Trust your instincts, everything else will come second. Alina obeyed, crouching low behind sandbags and abandoned training equipment. The desert floor crunched beneath her boots, each step measured and deliberate. She felt Maddox's presence beside her like a shield, his calm authority grounding her frayed nerves. Suddenly, a sharp click echoed through the darkness. Alina's body froze. Her eyes darted toward the sound, her heart hammering against her ribs. Suppressor, Maddox whispered. They're cautious, watching, testing, keep moving. Her hands gripped the rifle tightly. She had handled stress during simulations, during impossible shots, but this, the tangible threat of someone out there, tracking her, was different. The stakes were no longer about proving skill. They were about survival. They moved through the compound like shadows, slipping past obstacles and maintaining a low profile. Alina's mind raced, recalling everything Maddox had drilled into her: observation, anticipation, prediction. Every instinct she had buried over years of hiding surged to the surface. She noted the pattern of movement, the faint glimmer of night optics, the way the wind carried sound across the sand. Then a figure emerged from the shadows, moving swiftly and silently. Alina's breath caught. She froze, rifle aimed instinctively. Maddox touched her shoulder lightly. "Wait, don't engage unless I signal. It's a scout, watching us." Alina's pulse thundered. A scout. Her heart pounded, every second stretched like an eternity. She had never encountered an adversary in the real world. Not like this. Not with lives on the line. The scout moved, scanning, then vanished into the darkness. Maddox exhaled, barely audible. "Good observation. You noticed before they noticed you. That's what keeps you alive." Alina nodded, swallowing hard. The weight of her own mortality pressed down on her. This wasn't training. This wasn't a simulation. Every misstep could be fatal. They pressed forward, making their way toward the extraction point, a rugged old helicopter pad at the far edge of the compound. Maddox led, Alina following, her senses on high alert. Suddenly, the sharp, unmistakable crack of a rifle echoed in the distance. "Incoming," Maddox barked, diving for cover. Alina followed instinctively, hitting the sand just as tracer rounds streaked past, embedding in the walls and dirt around them. Her heart leaped into her throat. This was no longer about tests or simulations. The real world had arrived, and it was lethal. Maddox's voice was sharp in her ear. "Return fire only if necessary. Focus. Identify the threat. Move when the pattern shifts." Alina's training kicked in. She raised her rifle, scanning through the scope. Her hands were steady despite the chaos, her mind calculating trajectory, distance, and timing. She spotted movement, a shadow darting behind a supply crate. "Target on your left," Maddox shouted. Alina squeezed the trigger. The shot rang out precise, hitting the makeshift target. The shadow froze, then disappeared. Another movement, another shadow, another shot. Her confidence surged, tempered by fear. Every hit reinforced her skill, but every near miss reminded her how fragile life was out here. "Halfway there," Maddox called. "Keep moving." They advanced, weaving through obstacles, using every ounce of cover the compound offered. The night seemed alive with danger, every sound amplified, every shadow a potential threat. Alina's senses were hyper-focused. She could feel the rifle's vibrations, hear the faintest footstep, anticipate movement before it happened. Then, just as they neared the edge of the compound, a sudden explosion rocked the ground behind them. Dust and debris filled the air. Alina was thrown to the side, disoriented, coughing. Maddox was on his feet instantly, dragging her into cover. "Move," he yelled. "They've escalated." Alina scrambled to her feet, adrenaline overriding fear. Her hands gripped the rifle, vision sharp despite the chaos. The extraction point was close, just beyond the last line of sight, but every step forward now carried deadly risk. From the shadows, figures emerged, trained, calculated, moving with lethal precision. Maddox fired, taking out two threats as Alina followed instinctively, her shots accurate, decisive. The wind carried the smell of gunpowder and dust, mingling with the fear and adrenaline surging through her. "Almost there," Maddox shouted, pointing to the helicopter pad illuminated faintly by moonlight. Alina sprinted, diving behind cover as rounds tore through the air around her. One figure lunged, and she reacted without thinking, squeezing the trigger. The shot connected, and the path cleared. They reached the pad. The helicopter's rotors were already slicing through the night air, light casting eerie shadows across the sand. Maddox held the door open. "Get in." Alina scrambled inside, heart racing, chest heaving. The world outside the helicopter blurred in a whirlwind of dust, gunfire, and shadowy figures. The helicopter lifted off, engines roaring, carrying them away from immediate danger. Alina sank into her seat, trying to calm her shaking hands. The rifle lay across her lap, warm from the recent engagement, a tangible reminder of the day's chaos and her own capacity for survival. Maddox sat beside her, scanning the perimeter, ever vigilant. After a long moment, he finally allowed himself to relax slightly. "You did well," he said quietly. "Better than most would under the same circumstances." Alina exhaled, a mixture of relief, disbelief, and exhaustion washing over her. She had survived the impossible, a night filled with real danger, unpredictability, and lethal threats. Her instincts, training, and courage had carried her through. But as the helicopter flew toward safety, she couldn't shake the gnawing thought in the back of her mind. This wasn't over. Whoever was watching would come again, and next time it wouldn't just be a test. Maddox glanced at her, reading her expression. "This was just the beginning," he said. "They've noticed you now, and once they notice someone like you, there's no turning back. The world will demand more than you've ever imagined. You have to be ready." Alina nodded, a strange combination of fear and exhilaration tightening her chest. She had stepped into a world of danger, skill, and survival. She had faced real threats, made impossible shots, and escaped when it seemed hopeless. And now she knew, with chilling clarity, that the next challenge would test everything she had learned, and everything she thought she knew about herself. The helicopter lifted higher, carrying them into the night sky. Alina gripped her rifle, gaze fixed on the darkness outside, mind racing with anticipation, fear, and determination. The impossible escape had been survived. But the war was just beginning. The helicopter descended through a shroud of fog and dust, its rotors slicing through the night like blades. Alina gripped the rifle across her lap, knuckles white, eyes scanning every shadow outside the reinforced glass. The world felt both impossibly vast and suffocatingly close, as if danger lurked in every corner, waiting for a misstep. Maddox sat beside her, calm as always, but she could feel the tension in his body, subtle, coiled, like a predator ready to strike. "We're close," he said softly, voice low but carrying weight. "The extraction point is compromised. They've anticipated us. You need to be ready for everything, no hesitation." Alina's stomach churned. Compromised. After everything she had survived, impossible shots, deadly night ambushes, relentless pursuit, she had to face another layer of threat. The helicopter banked sharply, skimming the terrain as Maddox directed them toward a concealed landing site. "On my mark," he continued. "You cover me. Stay sharp. Remember everything you've learned: observation, anticipation, precision. Trust yourself." The fog thickened as they approached the clearing. Figures moved in the darkness, shadows twisting unnaturally in the helicopter's light. Alina's pulse quickened. She had faced fear before, but this was different, immediate, visceral, unavoidable. Every muscle in her body tensed, instincts firing like a finely tuned instrument. "Go," Maddox shouted. The helicopter skidded to a halt. Alina rolled off, rifle raised, scanning the tree line. Maddox moved ahead, clearing the perimeter. They were ambushed almost immediately. A group of armed adversaries emerged from the shadows, weapons raised, trained eyes locking on them. Alina didn't hesitate. She fired, precise, calculated, instinctive. One down, then another. Maddox covered her flank, moving with deadly efficiency. The air was thick with gunfire, dust, and the metallic tang of adrenaline. Every shot counted. Every breath mattered. One of the adversaries broke cover, rushing toward the helicopter, intent clear. Alina fired instinctively. The figure went down, collapsing into the fog. Maddox's voice cut through the chaos. "Push forward. Extraction is close." Her legs burned, but she moved, crouching low, covering Maddox as he cleared the path. Another figure lunged from behind a fallen crate. Alina's rifle barked and the threat was neutralized. She felt a strange, electrifying mix of fear and exhilaration, every instinct firing, every choice sharpening her focus. Then a sudden movement to her right, faster, sharper, more deliberate. Someone had anticipated her. Alina barely had time to react. She ducked, rolling into cover as the figure fired. The shot struck the crate where her head had been moments ago. Her heart slammed against her ribs. Maddox was beside her in an instant. Focus, predict, don't react. Alina's mind raced. The figure was skilled, methodical, experienced. This wasn't a random attack, it was calculated. She had to think beyond instinct, beyond training. She had to anticipate. A flash of movement caught her eye, a shadow stepping out from the fog to her left. She shifted her aim, tracked the figure, and fired. Bulls. The attacker dropped. Maddox nodded approvingly. Good, now move. They sprinted toward the extraction point, the fog thickening around them. Figures emerged again, but Alina had learned to read the chaos, to anticipate patterns, to move with precision and instinct. Each shot found its mark. Each movement was deliberate, calculated, alive. Finally, the clearing came into view. The extraction team, armed and ready, provided cover as the helicopter's ramp lowered. Alina's heart pounded in her chest. Just a few more steps, and they would be safe. But then a shadow moved differently. Alina froze, her instincts screamed. Maddox shouted, incoming right side. She pivoted, firing instinctively. The figure lunged at Maddox, weapon raised. Alina's shot was perfect, striking with a precision she didn't even realize she possessed. Maddox's eyes widened in respect and relief. They reached the ramp. Extraction team members helped them aboard. The helicopter lifted off just as the remaining threats opened fire, bullets sparking off metal, kicking up dust and debris. Alina sank into a seat, heart racing, adrenaline still coursing. Maddox sat beside her, glancing at her with a mixture of pride, awe, and something deeper. You did it, he said quietly. You didn't just survive. You led. You adapted. You made decisions under pressure most would crumble under. Alina exhaled, realizing her body was shaking not from fatigue but from the magnitude of what she had just accomplished. She had fired impossible shots, survived ambushes, and faced real danger, and she had done it with precision, instinct, and courage. For the first time, she saw herself differently. Not as a cleaner, not as someone hiding from her past, not as a girl who ran from danger, but as someone capable, someone formidable, someone alive in a way she had never been before. Maddox's voice broke into her thoughts again. This moment defines you, Alina. Not just the shot you made on the range, not just the skills you've hidden, but this, surviving, adapting, making impossible decisions under pressure. This is who you are, and anyone who doubts it will learn the hard way. Alina's mind swirled with relief, pride, and exhaustion. She realized the impossible shot that had started this chain of events was just the beginning. Every moment afterward, every instinctive move, every calculated decision had led to this defining point. The helicopter soared higher, leaving the fog and danger behind. Alina's gaze swept the horizon, her hands finally relaxing on the rifle. She had survived the impossible. She had faced her past, confronted real danger, and come out alive. And yet a flicker of unease remained. Maddox had made it clear the world was watching, and her skill had painted a target on her back. Survival had been won tonight, but the next challenge, the next threat, would come with no warning. She met Maddox's eyes, searching for reassurance, guidance, understanding. His expression was calm, steady, unyielding. You're ready, he said simply. The world will demand more, and you'll rise to meet it. That's what makes you extraordinary. Alina's chest tightened. Extraordinary. The word felt heavier now, full of meaning, responsibility, and danger. But it also carried a spark, a thrill she hadn't known she was capable of feeling. She had discovered something about herself she couldn't ignore. She had stepped out of invisibility and into a world that demanded courage, precision, and instinct, and she had survived. The helicopter flew toward safety, the darkness below stretching endlessly. Alina gripped her rifle once more, her eyes sharp, mind alert, heart steady. She had faced the impossible, escaped the deadly, and discovered the strength within herself she had never known. And she knew with certainty that nothing would ever be the same. The impossible shot had revealed who she truly was, and the world would never underestimate her again.